They called her a fraud, a joke, a fake soldier. She had no record, no rank history, and no unit wanted her. But 48 hours later, she would carry a wounded general 5 miles through an electronic dead zone, using a weapon that the military still denies exists. So, who was she? Why did the system try to erase her? And what happens when the final order doesn't come from a general, but walks in wearing no insignia at all? You're watching Veteran Biker, where the quiet ones hit hardest. Subscribe if you believe silent service deserves loud recognition. And now, let's go back to the day she first walked into that base. You don't belong here. The words struck like rifle fire. Sharp, cold, and public, Lieutenant Kara Elwood stood motionless in the briefing room as 32 pairs of eyes drilled into her, their scrutiny laced with mockery, suspicion, and something worse, disdain. The man who'd spoken, Colonel Travers, didn't even look up from the mission folder he was pretending to review. His voice, loud and deliberately dismissive, echoed through the metallic room lined with planning screens and digital maps. She hadn't spoken, not yet. Not when she was introduced to the team without a unit designation, not when the logistics officer asked why her name wasn't in the database, not even when Sergeant Baines, the platoon clown, whispered just loud enough, "Another influencer in uniform, huh?" And the room erupted in low laughter. And now, here she was, standing in front of a full tactical detachment preparing for deployment in the Al Juraid sector of northern Calhoun, one of the most volatile forward zones. In the Middle East, without rank credibility, without visible background, and with only the thin black bar of a lieutenant's insignia to protect her from being torn apart. A flicker crossed her expression, so brief it could be mistaken for a blink, but Reyes caught it. Private First Class Reyes, sitting at the back of the room and pretending to clean his boots, watched her like a man watching a chess game from 10 moves out. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing, he was calculating. Colonel Travers slapped the mission binder shut with a dramatic clap. This OP's no place for civilians playing soldier. If this is some diversity experiment from DC, we don't have the time or the body bags. Silence. Tight, uncomfortable silence. Kara's voice, when it came, was low and even. "I've been briefed. I'll follow the chain of command. No further disruption." "You're the disruption," Baines muttered under his breath. Kara turned her head slightly, not enough to provoke, just enough to be heard. "I've been shot at by people who meant it. You'll have to do better than that." The words hung like coiled wire in the air, sharp, dangerous, and for a second the room blinked, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Calm, flat, as if she was stating a logistical fact. The operations officer cleared his throat. "All right, that's enough. Everyone out. We step off in 48 hours. Get your kit checked." The room dispersed, the air thick with tension, boots clattering against the steel flooring. Kara remained in place for just a beat longer before stepping out into the corridor. The concrete hallway of Fob Emberline buzzed with the dull hum of generators, distant echoes of training gunfire, and the low murmur of tactical teams rotating in and out of the command tents. She made her way to the barracks silently, her steps neither rushed nor hesitant. Eyes followed her down the corridor. None greeted her. A few whispered. One even barked out, "Stolen valor much?" She didn't stop. In her room, bare, regulation tight, no photos, no marks of personality, she sat at the edge of her cot and slowly removed her boots. Her fingers moved with practiced mechanical precision. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. They'd done this before, every time, every new location, every reassignment, every unfamiliar fob where her records didn't match, where her presence didn't add up. The same stares, the same laughter, the same doubt, and every time she said nothing. She logged it, she waited. They never remembered the names of the people who laughed. But they never forgot the day someone didn't laugh anymore. Private Reyes wasn't a fan of rumors. In his experience, people who talked the most usually knew the least. But Kara Elwood didn't just invite rumors, she absorbed them, silently, absently, like rain falling on armor. He watched from a distance at first, not because he doubted her, but because the silence around her spoke louder than any slur. She wasn't just a mystery, she was a vacuum. She didn't eat in the mess with the others. Her gear never needed checking. Her locker had no lock. No one had seen her run a drill. No one had ever seen her lose her temper, and yet every day at 0500, Reyes noticed the lights in her room clicked on precisely 2 minutes before morning reveille. She was always awake, always moving, like she knew the timing of things 2 steps ahead of schedule. He passed her in the corridor once, near the armory. She was holding a slim, dark case the size of a hardbound book. It wasn't standard issue, the kind of thing someone would mistake for a medical kit or encrypted comms module. Reyes noticed the small triangular icon on the edge, barely visible, almost burned in. It looked classified. She noticed him looking. He expected her to tuck it away. She didn't. She simply met his eyes, calm, unblinking, and held the stare for a full beat longer than was comfortable. Then she turned the corner and vanished. Later that afternoon, the base's senior medic, Lieutenant Marcus Green, was overheard muttering to the quartermaster, "She's got the calm of a surgeon and the reflexes of a sniper." I've never seen hands that still, and still no one trusted her. In the mess hall, the tension followed her like a shadow. Kara walked in carrying her tray, plain rice, steamed vegetables, a single hard-boiled egg. She sat at the far end of the row, alone, not because she wanted to, but because that's where the unspoken rule had placed her. The table next to hers emptied the moment she arrived. Staff Sergeant Baines chuckled from across the room and mimed whispering into his radio. "Fob Control, this is Tango Actual. We've got a vegan assassin on base, requesting tofu airstrike, over." Laughter rolled across the room like shrapnel. Kara didn't look up. She calmly peeled the egg, placed the shell on a napkin, and continued eating. Colonel Travers entered a moment later and didn't miss the joke or the target. He walked over, his boots clacking with intent, and leaned one hand on her table. "You planning on actually earning your keep here, Elwood? Or just here to take notes for some Pentagon diversity report?" Reyes dropped his spoon. That was too much. But Kara spoke first, quiet and deliberate. "Sir, I was assigned by Theater Command. Any questions about my placement can be directed to the Black Level desk at CENTCOM, Channel 9 Foxtrot." Colonel Travers blinked. So did several others. That wasn't standard protocol. That wasn't a code anyone knew. He stepped back, something uncertain flickering behind his eyes. "You know what? Keep your secrets. But when it hits the fan, we'll see if a ghost soldier is worth a damn." As he turned to leave, Reyes caught the faintest curve of Kara's lip. A smile so small, so cold, it felt carved from stone. That night, Reyes searched for Channel 9 Foxtrot. There was no such channel, but the term turned up one redacted document on a backdoor server he wasn't supposed to have access to. The header read, "Phantom Echo personnel, level 9, everything else was blacked out." Reyes leaned back, heart hammering. Who the hell is she? By the next morning, the entire forward operating base had received revised assignments. Most soldiers grumbled, some loudly, but one name was conspicuously absent from the mission brief. Kara Elwood. Her removal wasn't even mentioned. She simply wasn't on the sheet. Not for recon, not for Overwatch, not for security detail, not even on standby logistics. It was as if the system had reabsorbed her, quietly erasing her from the physical operation without leaving a trace of protest or explanation. Baines grinned like he'd won a bet. Guess Ghost Girl finally evaporated. Colonel Travers didn't comment, but his silence was the kind that declared victory without words. Reyes watched from the corner of the tent, a sick feeling turning in his gut. This wasn't just a bureaucratic glitch. Someone had made that change intentionally and fast, and no one, not even the XO, seemed willing to question it. Later that day, he found Kara sitting alone behind the comms shack, notebook in hand, writing longhand in precise, almost calligraphic strokes. She didn't look up as he approached. "You're off the manifest," he said. She kept writing. "I checked the update log. Your name was removed at 0300. That takes admin-level access and a justification code. Still nothing." Reyes hesitated. "You could file a challenge." "I could," she said finally, "and you're not going to." "I'm not here to prove anything to anyone, Reyes." He didn't respond immediately. The sound of wind stirred loose canvas nearby. A distant burst of gunfire from a training range crackled through the sky. "You knew this would happen," he said. "Yes." Her voice was quiet but unyielding, like the edge of a blade kept sheathed just beneath the skin. Reyes sat down opposite her on the gravel. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked the one question that had been haunting him since day one. "Why are you really here?" She looked at him, not with surprise, but with a kind of recognition, as if she'd been waiting for someone to ask that without malice. "To watch," she said. "To listen. To be here when no one else can be." "Sounds like a spook." "No," she replied. "Spooks report things. I stop them." He was about to ask what she meant when her eyes suddenly flicked past his shoulder. Subtle, fast, reflexive. He turned. Major Lang, the head of base security, was walking straight toward them, 2 MPs in tow. "Elwood," Lang barked. "You're to return your encrypted comms unit and clearance badge?" "Effective immediately, your forward privileges are suspended pending verification from Central Command." "I wasn't aware they needed re-verification," Kara said evenly. Lang's expression tightened. "Apparently, someone higher up disagrees. Don't make this difficult." She rose without a word and handed over her badge and device. Reyes stepped forward instinctively, fists clenching. "You can't just—" "Yes, they can," Kara cut him off gently. Lang turned without further comment and walked off. The MPs followed. Kara turned back to Reyes, and in that moment he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not fear, not frustration, but clarity. Cold, focused, like a chess player who just lost a pawn to trap a king. "Stay observant, Private," she said quietly. Then she was gone. Reyes wasn't supposed to be in the server room. It was 0246 hours, and the night had finally dipped into that strange stillness where even the desert wind fell quiet. Most of the base was asleep or pretending to be. Reyes wasn't sure what category he fell into anymore. Ever since Kara was suspended from deployment, a knot of something he couldn't name had tightened in his chest. Curiosity, maybe, or unease. He knew what protocol demanded. Let it go. Focus on your own orders. Stay in your lane. But something about Kara Elwood didn't belong in any lane. Her words looped in his mind like a glitch in a comms line. To be here when no one else can be. So he pulled favors, whispered to the junior tech in Bravo Signals team that he needed a minute to fix a corrupted helmet cam file. The kid owed him 3, and this was a quiet debt to collect. The terminal buzzed awake with a cold blue glow. Reyes typed quickly, searching not for names, but for anomalies. Kara's personnel file didn't exist in the standard database. That alone was strange, but he already knew that what was stranger was what came up when he filtered the system for access logs from the week Kara arrived. There it was, a 9-digit code, unfamiliar even to a base with its own Black Ops detachment, not attached to any unit, not signed off by admin. But it was used to generate her security clearance on day 1. Reyes copied the code, switched terminals, and rerouted through a diagnostic access point usually reserved for drone feeds. That's when he saw it. Phantom Echo. 9F, the words blinked once, then disappeared. The system dumped him out with a system timeout and a vague warning about privileged architecture violation. His heart pounded, not because of what he found, because of what he almost found. He leaned back in the chair thinking, Phantom Echo, level 9F. That wasn't a call sign. It was a clearance band, something above top secret. Something that didn't just hide people, it erased them, and Kara had spoken it like it was just another radio channel. The next morning, Kara wasn't at breakfast, not that anyone noticed. Baines was too busy complaining about rations, and Travers had his usual morning scowl locked into place as he briefed the logistics group on shifting supply routes. But Reyes noticed, and so did Lieutenant Marcus Green, the base medic, who muttered under his breath as he entered the mess, still calm, too calm. Reyes approached him, tray in hand. "Excuse me, sir, when you say calm, you mean emotionally or—" Green gave him a look, not annoyed, just surprised someone asked. "I mean physically. I saw her with the trauma kit last week, organizing IV bags like she'd done it 1,000 times in a field hospital. And her hands?" He paused, tapping 2 fingers against the side of his cup. Rock steady. Even during that blast last week, she didn't flinch. The mortar landed 30 yards out and everyone jumped. She just looked up. 1 second, then kept walking. Reyes tried not to let it show, but a chill crawled down his spine. Green squinted at him. "What do you know about her, Private?" "Nothing," Reyes admitted, "and that's starting to scare me." Reyes didn't consider himself a stalker. He was, by all accounts, a rule-abiding Marine with a decent track record and enough sense to stay out of classified territory. But here he was, crouched in the shadow of the motor pool at 0420, binoculars in hand, eyes trained on the southeast perimeter. Kara Elwood was outside the wire. She wasn't running drills, she wasn't armed, she wasn't wearing standard recon gear. Just a dark compression shirt, tactical pants, and a small, form-fitting pack across her back that looked like it had been custom-stitched from Kevlar and something else he couldn't identify. It didn't reflect any light. She moved like fog, smooth, near silent, pacing a 40-yard stretch of open sand and brush with perfectly timed footwork. Not exercise, not stress relief. Training, not just training, rehearsing. Reyes zoomed in and saw something flicker at her wrist. She reached into the strap of her pack and pulled out the device again, the same one he'd seen near the armory. Only now, in the pre-dawn darkness, it came alive. A soft pulse of light spread from the center of the device like ripples in water, glowing faintly blue, then violet. Not lead, not IR, something else. Kara held it at arm's length, angled toward the horizon, and stood perfectly still for nearly 15 seconds. Then, a low hum, barely audible, pushed into the air like pressure. Reyes felt it in his chest more than he heard it, like a subsonic shift you only noticed after it passed. Then, just as quickly, the device darkened and was slipped back into her side harness. Kara moved again, fast now. A sprint across sand, drop, roll, rise. Hand gestures into open space like she was operating an interface that wasn't there. It looked like something out of a training sim, except there was no headset, no projection, no gear, just her. And that thing? Reyes ducked as she turned suddenly, scanning the ridgeline. He flattened himself behind the tire of an old Humvee and held his breath. After a few moments, her posture relaxed again. She began walking back toward the base. Reyes stayed put for another 5 minutes before rising. His mind raced, trying to piece together what he'd seen. This wasn't Black Ops, this wasn't recon, this was something else. He'd seen SEALs train with prototype tech before, but nothing like that. The device hadn't just sent out a signal. It had mapped something, or triggered something, and Kara, she hadn't hesitated once. Back in the barracks, Reyes scribbled what he could remember in a small field notebook. He didn't have clearance to report what he saw. He didn't even know how to phrase it. but he knew enough to write 3 words underlined 3 times. She's not guessing. The next afternoon, General Mason arrived on base. It was meant to be a logistics review, morale tour, press handshakes, maybe a few inspirational speeches before a helicopter extraction. Reyes caught sight of him stepping off the tilt rotor, flanked by aides and armed guards. He didn't know it yet, but in less than 48 hours that same general would be bleeding out in the dirt, staring into the face of the fake soldier everyone thought didn't belong. And Kara Elwood would be holding the only weapon capable of keeping him alive. It happened less than a day later. A Raven-class surveillance UAV had gone rogue during a routine perimeter scan. Its flight path glitched mid-air, veering dangerously off course toward the northwest ridge, a no-fly zone due to ongoing artillery calibration tests. The comms room erupted into chaos. Who's on telemetry? Why isn't the kill switch working? We've got artillery live on that ridge in T-90. Colonel Travers barked from the tower control node. Shut it down! That thing crashes near a live battery. We're not just losing a drone, we're risking a sympathetic detonation. Reyes was in the outer corridor when the alert went out. His hand instinctively moved to his radio, but paused when he spotted something out of the corner of his eye. Movement. Outside the reinforced glass, near the eastern gravel line, someone was walking with purpose toward the base's external uplink node. Everyone else was in the control room. No one was assigned out there, but she was. Kara Elwood, calm as ever. No helmet, no body armor, just a black tactical hoodie zipped to the neck, and that same low-profile device in her hand. She reached the uplink tower and pressed her hand to the encrypted panel, one that typically required 2-factor clearance, including retinal scan or senior officer override. The panel blinked red, then blue, then off. The air above the tower shimmered, barely, a flicker, like heat rising from pavement. Then, just as quickly as it began, the alert inside comms went silent. Reyes heard the controller exhale. Wait, Raven just stabilized. Another voice, it corrected its own flight path. No way. Wait, it's re-entering standard circuit pattern? Who authorized the override? They all turned to Travers. He didn't say a word. Reyes watched as Kara walked calmly back toward the barracks. She wasn't hiding. She didn't run. She moved like she had every right to touch systems no one else could even access. Reyes didn't sleep that night. He kept seeing it, the shimmer, the pulse of the tower, the way the UAV suddenly obeyed something that wasn't part of any protocol. Something clicked in his mind. That device wasn't a weapon. At least, not in the traditional sense. It was a node, something that could interface with infrastructure without needing physical permission, not a drone jammer, not a signal scrambler, a battlefield key, the kind of thing that could turn war zones into controlled environments. And Kara Elwood? She wasn't just its handler, she was its failsafe. The next morning, Kara's name was still absent from all duty rosters. No one mentioned the drone incident. No one asked who fixed it. The event was classified as spontaneous telemetry correction, a phrase Reyes would come to loathe. But he knew. And somewhere deep down, so did the system that tried to keep her hidden. The official memo arrived at 0700 sharp. Subject: revocation of systems-level clearance. Lieutenant Kara Elwood. Status: temporary suspension, pending HQ verification, effective immediately. Access to comms, uplink terminals, drone interfaces, and autonomous combat control modules is hereby restricted. She read it once, folded it precisely down the middle, and slid it under her mattress without a word. The rest of the base read it before breakfast. By noon, the whispers returned, louder this time, sharpened with new venom. She tripped something classified and got flagged. Probably Chinese tech. No one makes stuff that clean. They're not saying spy, but they don't need to. Reyes sat across from her in the mess tent, tray untouched. They're treating this like a disciplinary hearing. I know. They froze your badge. I noticed. And they took the device, didn't they? She paused, then gave a single slow nod. That was the part that rattled Reyes most. Earlier that morning, a unit of base security, led not by MPs but by Colonel Travers himself, had walked into Kara's quarters with sealed orders and confiscated the small black case she kept under lock. No questions asked. No protest filed, not even a signature of receipt, just a cold administrative sweep, as if the thing were evidence in a criminal investigation. They don't even know what it is, Reyes muttered. They're afraid of it? They should be, Kara replied softly. He looked up. She wasn't being dramatic, she wasn't angry, she was stating a fact, like someone who knew exactly what a device like that could do in the wrong hands, or worse, in ignorant ones. Reyes pushed his tray aside, appetite gone. You're not going to fight this, are you? There's nothing to fight. That's not an answer. Kara's eyes met his, and for the first time since he'd met her, Reyes saw the crack beneath the surface. Not fear, not regret, something colder, acceptance. This place was never built for what I do, and I was never meant to stay in one place long enough for questions. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Not when the table next to them went silent and 3 soldiers got up and left without a word, just to avoid being associated with her. Not when the same comms officer who used to chat with her during evening shift now looked the other way when she entered a room, and not when Colonel Travers made it his daily routine to walk past her with just enough volume to say, "Security threat wrapped in protocol." That afternoon, Reyes passed the intel room and saw something that made his stomach twist. The black device, her device, was sitting on a foam-padded tray inside an open observation unit. A team of engineers in hazmat light suits poked at it with sterilized styluses like it might explode if they breathed too hard. Reyes leaned toward the glass. The device was inert, no blinking, no pulse, just dark matte casing, almost slate-colored now in the lab light. One of the engineers turned it over and tapped twice near the panel. Reyes watched as a green line flickered, then went dead. He exhaled, but not in relief. They didn't know what they were holding, and God help them if it ever woke up in the wrong moment. The order wasn't subtle. A physical letter, hand-delivered by an enlisted runner, sealed with the mark of Central Command. Reyes watched from a distance as Kara unfolded the message on the edge of the helipad, her face unreadable. The wind tugged at her sleeves, but her fingers held the page steady like stone. She read it once, folded it, then sat down on a nearby ammo crate and stared into the dust-thick horizon. The runner didn't wait. He turned sharply and jogged back to the admin wing without so much as a glance. The word spread fast. Lieutenant Elwood had been reassigned, until further notice. But it wasn't a reassignment, it was exile. She wasn't going to another FOB. She wasn't being rotated out with a clean debrief. She was being told to wait for an outbound transport. Destination classified, departure indefinite. Unofficially, she was being disappeared. Reyes found her in the motor pool later that afternoon, running her fingers along the wheel well of a Humvee like she was tracing the memory of movement. "They want you gone," he said. "I know. This isn't about protocol anymore. This is personal." Kara gave a faint shrug, eyes still on the vehicle. "It's always personal when someone doesn't fit the system." "That's bullshit. You saved that Raven drone. No one else could have done it, and no one will ever say it out loud." Reyes leaned against the truck beside her, jaw tight. "They're scared." "Not of me," she said quietly, "of what I represent." He turned to her, fists clenching. "Then tell me what that is. Tell me what they're so afraid of." Kara looked at him then, long and searching, as if weighing whether the truth would set anything free, or just tighten the noose. "I'm what happens when the chain of command doesn't reach far enough," she said, "when someone has to make a decision no one wants to sign for. I don't exist on paper because the people who built me knew one day I'd need to act before permission." Reyes felt the words sink like iron into his gut. "You're a contingency." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Before he could respond, a sharp voice cut across the lot. "Elwood!" Colonel Travers strode toward them, flanked by 2 MPs. His face was rigid, pulled tight with the expression of a man who'd convinced himself the system was righteous because it served him. "You're not authorized to be here anymore," he snapped. "You've been relieved of duty. Orders are clear." Kara turned slowly. "I haven't interfered. Your presence is interference." Reyes stepped forward, instinct overriding protocol. "Sir, with respect." Travers whipped his gaze toward him. "At ease, private. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Reyes said firmly. Travers took a step closer, voice lowering. "You really want to go down with her? She's already a footnote, kid, a cautionary tale." Reyes didn't flinch. "Then I'll take notes." For a long moment, silence pressed between them like a blade. Then Kara touched Reyes's arm gently. "It's fine," she said. "I'm done fighting shadows." Travers smirked. "Good, because you're leaving on the next bird out. 0600. He turned and walked away without waiting for a response. Reyes stared after him, fists still clenched, as Kara walked past without another word. But as she did, she slid something small into his palm. It was a flash drive, unlabeled, cold, and far too light to be ordinary. The flash drive sat in Reyes's palm like a stone. No markings, no encryption label, just a matte black casing with an odd texture, almost like scorched carbon fiber. He turned it over once, twice, unsure if it was a data key or a detonator. Then again, coming from Kara, it might have been both. He waited until lights out. At 2300, the barracks were silent except for the hum of recycled air and the soft rustle of bunk sheets. Reyes slipped out of his cot, crossed to the far corner of the equipment bay, and booted up a diagnostics terminal no one had touched in months. It wasn't connected to the base's secure network, just a standalone system used for gear calibration. He plugged the drive in. No file tree appeared, just a single folder labeled Level 9F, Temporal Brief. Eyes only, he clicked. The screen blinked twice, then loaded a low-resolution video feed. No sound, just black and white footage time-stamped from 3 months ago at a different forward operating base halfway across the world. Reyes leaned closer. It showed a convoy under ambush, vehicles burning, personnel scattered. Chaos. Then the camera panned. A figure moved through smoke and fire, calm, deliberate. Reyes froze. It was Kara. Her face was partly obscured by soot, but her posture was unmistakable. She wasn't armed. She wasn't running. She was commanding. Suddenly, several UAVs dropped out of the sky, almost simultaneously, crashing in perfect arcs around her. Seconds later, the feed scrambled. The screen cut to text, Phantom Echo response complete, containment threshold reached. Asset standing by, unrecoverable under standard protocol. Reyes sat back in his chair, throat dry. She wasn't just a ghost, she was a failsafe, a self-guided countermeasure deployed when command structures failed. Kara Elwood had been sent to hot zones not to observe, but to intervene when entire units broke down. And her authority didn't come from any general, it came from someone higher or deeper. He scrolled down further. A final line appeared. If this drive was given to you, the system eyes failing. Do not wait for permission. He pulled the drive, tucked it into his vest, and shut down the terminal. That's when the first siren began to wail, shrill, urgent. The lights in the bay flickered to red. A voice barked over the intercom, alert, outbound convoy under attack. IED contact. Casualties confirmed. Command unit compromised. Reyes's blood ran cold. The outbound convoy, the one Kara had been assigned to, the one carrying General Mason. Without thinking, Reyes sprinted for the comms room. Travers's voice was already crackling over the open channel, yelling for medevac authorization and backup route coordination, but Reyes wasn't listening to Travers. He was thinking about Kara. She was out there, And if the situation was half as bad as the drive implied, she might be the only one who could stop it from becoming something worse. Much worse. The last confirmed visual of Lieutenant Kara Elwood was captured by a dashcam in Convoy Alpha at 0542. She stood beside Vehicle 3, the unmarked transport designated for General Mason, adjusting the strap of her harness with practiced ease. Her expression, as always, was unreadable. Her eyes flicked once toward the tree line, then to the ridge line overhead. 2 minutes later, the convoy rolled out. 12 personnel, 4 Humvees, 1 general. At 0607, the signal from all 4 vehicles vanished. It wasn't a fade, it was a sever. Comms blacked out, satellite telemetry scrambled, even the drone feed circling from 15,000 feet above snapped into static for exactly 3.4 seconds before rebooting, too brief to trigger full reroute, too long to be accidental. By 0609, alarms screamed through FOB Emberline. Reyes was already in motion. "Where's the convoy?" he demanded, bursting into the ops tent. Colonel Travers snapped around. "What the hell are you doing here?" Reyes ignored him. "Where's the general? Have you established line of sight?" "No visuals. We're flying blind. One drone's looping but can't lock GPS. Something's jamming the spectrum. Who has eyes on Elwood?" Travers' expression darkened. "She boarded Vehicle 3. Now shut your damn mouth, Private. That convoy is under coordinated attack and you are not cleared." But Reyes was already gone. He sprinted across the gravel lot, grabbing his kit from a gear locker en route. His rifle clattered against his vest as he yanked a radio from the emergency case near the helipad and checked the battery. No signal. The jamming field was real. But it wasn't from the enemy. It was too controlled, too clean. This wasn't just blocking frequencies, it was overriding them. A signal this strong had to come from inside the perimeter, or from something embedded inside the convoy itself. Reyes pulled up short near a parked comms truck and found Sergeant Lee, one of the base engineers, running diagnostics. "Are we being hacked?" Reyes shouted. Lee shook his head, confused and pale. "Not exactly. Our frequencies aren't being broken. They're being rerouted." "Rerouted where?" Lee pointed to the monitor. "To nowhere. The packets are bouncing, looping every 3 seconds, like someone built a box around the entire grid." Reyes stared at the display. It was looping, all right, a closed signal path, repeating back into itself endlessly, a communications dead zone, and at its center, Kara Reyes knew it. She wasn't running from the attack. She was walking into it. The dirt road toward Grid 22 Kilo was scorched. Reyes crouched low behind a broken tree trunk, binoculars pressed to his face, eyes sweeping the horizon for movement. Smoke drifted lazily from the ridge above, curling into the grey morning sky like warning flares. He'd made it 3 miles beyond the perimeter, unauthorized, unarmed by regulation, and entirely alone. But none of that mattered anymore. He had to find her. The terrain leading up to the last known GPS ping was chaos. Tire tracks dug deep into the soil, overlaid with blast craters and streaks of ash. The lead vehicle had been flipped onto its roof, its wheels still spinning slowly, whirring like the last gasp of a clock running out. But what stopped Reyes cold wasn't the wreckage, it was the precision. No shell casings, no stray impact marks on surrounding trees, no bodies in the open, and no blood, only black scorch patterns across the gravel, 5 feet wide, radiating outward like the petals of a mechanical flower. He moved forward slowly, passing the twisted frame of Vehicle 2. Its doors were open. Inside, the seats were intact, the floors covered in shattered glass and what looked like frozen droplets of carbon scattered in symmetrical lines. Reyes narrowed his eyes. This wasn't an IED strike, this was surgical, too clean, too directional. It was as if someone had set a blast radius and then manually carved away the damage around anything vital. He climbed onto a small ridge for a better view of the crash site. Then he saw it. 10 meters beyond the smoke, in the center of the kill zone, was a circular pattern burned into the earth, faint but deliberate. Reyes had seen diagrams like it in an encrypted training brief long ago, on theoretical tech not yet deployed. A null pulse zone, an EMP signature, but tighter, focused, not for disabling electronics, for isolating them. Someone had dropped a suppression field directly on the convoy, not to destroy it, but to trap it, and then what? He scanned again. Something glinted near the tree line. Movement. Reyes ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding. He raised his binoculars again. A single figure, limping slightly, dragging something, or someone, a body. Reyes focused harder. It was her. Kara. She had General Mason slung across her back, blood trailing from his right leg. One of his arms hung limp. His head lolled slightly, but he was breathing. She moved fast, too fast for someone hauling another full-grown man, and in her left hand, the device. It was active again, pulsing faintly. Blue, then violet, then black. She wasn't escaping, she was navigating through a trap someone else had set. Reyes dropped down the slope, boots barely kissing the gravel as he followed Kara's path. The trees thinned into a shallow ravine where broken branches told a story of haste or pursuit. He caught flashes of Kara ahead, still carrying the general across her shoulders, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd trained for years in isolation, whose mind processed distance and fatigue like variables in an equation. But then she stopped. Reyes froze. Kara lowered General Mason gently against a tree, positioning him upright with his head tilted slightly to maintain airflow. She touched 2 fingers to his pulse, confirmed, then stood, shoulders tensing. Across the clearing, someone else was moving. A figure emerged from the smoke, limping but armed, tactical rifle in hand, foreign armor patch half burned off, the other half displaying an untraceable symbol, white fang on a black field. Mercenary. Kara raised her empty hand. He's not your target anymore. The man laughed. Wasn't just him. His finger tightened on the trigger, but the round never fired. The moment he squeezed, the device in Kara's other hand pulsed once. The rifle locked, seized. A soft buzz crackled, and the mercenary looked down, confused, shaking the weapon violently, then tried to draw a sidearm. Too late. Kara moved, not like a soldier, like a machine trained in the art of minimal destruction. She crossed the gap between them in 2 strides, swept his leg, elbowed him once across the jaw, and before he hit the dirt, she yanked the device from her belt and pressed it to his chest. The light flared violet. He spasmed, not screaming, just frozen, like every nerve had lost its orders. Kara crouched. You weren't briefed on what I was. The mercenary gasped. You're not on the list. I'm the reason the list exists. Then she dropped him, unconscious, maybe alive. Reyes stepped out, rifle lowered. You didn't have to hit him like that. She turned to him. Yes, I did. He gestured to the device. That thing, it's not just tech, is it? Kara looked down at it, then back to Reyes. It's a firewall. A what? Against people who break protocol so completely, there's no command left to stop them. Reyes glanced toward the limp mercenary, then back at her. And what are you? Kara stood still for a moment. Then, I'm what they deploy when trust no longer works. Reyes swallowed hard. And Mason? Alive. But compromised. His convoy wasn't just ambushed. Someone inside greenlit the location. He was a target from both ends. Inside command? Maybe higher. Reyes stared at her. Why the hell didn't they let you in sooner? Kara's expression didn't change. Because I don't follow orders, I replace them. Above, the sky began to clear. The jamming signal was fading. The storm had passed, but something far larger was just beginning to stir. Kara adjusted her grip as Mason's weight shifted across her back. The general was slipping in and out of consciousness, his blood seeping through the improvised tourniquet wrapped around his thigh. Every step she took sent a dull pulse of pain up her left calf, the result of a low trajectory ricochet during the extraction. She hadn't slowed. The forest was thick now, denser than anything near the base perimeter. Sunlight cut through in shards, broken and sharp. She moved with precision, not guessing, calculating. She was following a path only she could see, guided not by terrain or GPS, but by something else entirely. The device strapped to her left wrist emitted a single muted pulse every 90 seconds. Not enough to draw signal tracing, just enough to keep her aligned with the path she'd mapped in her head before the mission ever started. Mason groaned. Where am I? Alive, Kara said flatly. For now. He chuckled weakly. You don't sound very happy about that. Neutral is all I've got left. She adjusted his position slightly, shifting his weight to relieve pressure on his ribs. How far? He rasped. 6 miles, she replied. He laughed again, broken, breathless. You're carrying a 220-pound man across broken ground in combat boots. For 6 miles? Kara didn't answer, because she didn't need to. They both knew it was insane. They both knew it wasn't possible, not without adrenaline, not without backup, not without sheer human willpower, fracturing into instinct, but she was doing it, because failure wasn't an outcome that Kara Elwood had ever been taught to recognize. Behind her, the trees rustled faintly. She didn't stop. Her left hand flicked the device once and the pulse map reappeared on a small pane across her wrist, a floating grid overlaying the real world. 3 signals pinged weakly nearby. She avoided them, steering wide through terrain Reyes wouldn't have recognized on any official map. She was bypassing patrol routes, not to avoid detection, to avoid questions. If the base saw her coming, they'd try to meet her halfway. And she didn't trust whoever would be waiting at the line. Better to arrive on her terms. At 0825, she reached the second ridge, where the forest dropped into a ravine. She crouched to check Mason's breathing, still shallow, still steady. She pulled a small vial from her vest, cracked it open, and held it under his nose. He snapped awake, groaning. What? Oxygen stimulant. You'll need it for the climb. What climb? She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled him upright, slinging his arm over her shoulder like they were old friends at a reunion, not survivors of a classified ambush. Mason looked at her then, really looked, and said something she hadn't expected. I was wrong about you. Kara didn't look back. Everyone is. At 0903, inside FOB Emberline's operations center, Reyes leaned over a flickering console and frowned. Again? He asked the tech at the comms board. 3rd time in 20 minutes, the tech replied. It's not full jamming, just weird. Intermittent distortion on sectors 18 through 22. Pulse anomalies. Drone feed? Stable. But telemetry keeps bending, like something's interfering with directional alignment. Reyes stared at the screen, heart tightening. She was coming back, not through the roads, not along the air corridor. Kara Elwood was threading her way between the systems. Just like before, he pulled up the thermal overlay. The outer motion sensors flickered, momentarily dropping to grayscale for 2 seconds, then returning. Barely long enough to trip an alert, but too perfect to be random. To anyone else it looked like noise. To Reyes it looked like a signature. She was disabling sectors one at a time, rotating through them in a pattern that kept her off the books. Like stepping between raindrops during a downpour. At 0914 he saw a flash of heat just beyond checkpoint Echo. A small outbuilding near the back end of the supply depot, barely used, rarely patrolled. A side gate marked emergency exit only, except this emergency wasn't in the manual. Reyes turned to Sergeant Lee at the adjacent terminal. Has anyone done a visual check on Echo Gate? Lee shook his head. Not since 0600. Send someone now. Lee raised a brow. Why? Reyes stared at the screen, knowing full well the response he shouldn't give. But he gave it anyway. Because I think someone's coming back through a door they were never supposed to open. Outside, Kara knelt beneath the shadow of the fencing. She tapped the mesh near the access panel. 3 quick pulses, 1 long. The device in her palm glowed faintly and released a harmonic frequency, inaudible to humans but strong enough to convince the aging sensor hub that it had just completed a valid ID scan. The gate clicked open with a gentle magnetic thunk. Kara dragged Mason through, his breathing ragged but steadier now after the stimulant. She knew she had less than 3 minutes before someone spotted the anomaly, a power blink, a thermal spike, anything, and sent Boots her way. She didn't plan to be here in 3 minutes. She headed straight for the auxiliary med wing, the one connected to the drone hangar, not the main infirmary. It had no guards, no windows, just an old keycard system she'd already bypassed 2 nights ago out of habit. Reyes sprinted down the corridor at 0918, heart in his throat. He turned the final corner just as a side door hissed shut. The sensor hadn't even registered an entry, but he knew she was here. General Mason collapsed onto the medbay gurney with a grunt, sweat glistening on his forehead as 2 stunned corpsmen scrambled into motion. Kara stepped back without a word. She'd entered through the loading bay 2 minutes earlier, bypassed the locked door using the same pulse signature, and wheeled in a repurposed cargo dolly, carrying the unconscious general wrapped in a torn thermal sheet. It wasn't how dignitaries were meant to arrive, but it worked. One of the medics blinked in disbelief. Is that? Gunshot wound, right thigh, blood loss stabilized, 2 cracked ribs, mild concussion, no spinal trauma, Kara said flatly. He'll wake in 20 minutes. The other corpsman frowned. Wait, who are you? But she was already gone. Out the back entrance before even Reyes could reach the room. By the time he burst through the side door 30 seconds later, Kara had vanished into the shadows between hangars, her outline swallowed by morning haze. All that remained was Mason's labored breathing and a pair of speechless medics trying to comprehend how the general had been dragged across half a combat zone by a woman the entire base had just stripped of clearance. Across the compound, Colonel Travers stared at the security terminal, jaw clenched. Where the hell is she? A young analyst replied nervously. We just lost visual, sir. She was on the auxiliary cam for 10 seconds, then nothing. No logs. It's like she never... Lock the base down, Travers barked. Emergency override. All exits. All sectors. I want Lieutenant Elwood in custody before she disappears again. Sir, she's not listed on the manifest. Exactly, he growled. Find the ghost. At 0937, a level 4 perimeter lockdown was initiated. Alarms pulsed through the air, deep, rhythmic, like a slow heartbeat threatening to quicken. Metal gates sealed, patrols deployed, tracking software rerouted to search for thermal irregularities. But it was already too late. Kara had scrubbed herself from the system minutes earlier, not just deleted, denied. When Sergeant Lee tried to query her security clearance to trace her movement, the system responded with a 3-word rejection code. Accessor not recognized. It wasn't a lockout, it was an erasure. As if Kara Elwood had never existed in the base's registry. Travers slammed his fist onto the console. How the hell does a lieutenant erase herself from a defense grid? No one answered, because deep down, everyone knew the same impossible truth. She wasn't supposed to be in the grid to begin with. Reyes stood alone behind the drone hangar, scanning the skyline. He didn't expect to see her. He didn't. But in the silence, he felt something stir. A flicker in the air, a shift in the way the base breathed, and when he opened his hand, the flash drive Kara had given him the day before was glowing, just faintly, but pulsing, Like a countdown, at 1015 hours, Reyes stood in the old comms bunker. The room smelled of rust and dust, a relic from when the base still relied on analog backups. No one had touched this place in years. That's why he chose it. The flash drive sat in his palm, its glow steady now, not bright, not urgent, but intentional. He inserted it into the isolated terminal, bypassed the standard security wall with the override Kara had etched on a torn scrap of field map. Dear, 9th hidden, code, shadows don't ask, the screen blinked, then came to life. A grainy video loaded, time-stamped 19 months ago. The footage showed a war room, not a typical one. The walls were lined with deep black panels not labeled, and the men sitting around the table wore no visible insignia, only rank tabs and blank shoulder sleeves. One of them, a major general, maybe higher, stood and began to speak. Phantom Echo isn't a squad, it's not even a unit, it's a containment doctrine, a single asset deployed into high failure zones where standard command has collapsed. He gestured to the projection beside him. Kara Elwood's face appeared. No rank, no name, just the image and one word beneath it. Fail-safe. The Elwood protocol is non-hierarchical. She doesn't report, she activates. If you see her on your field, it means the system no longer trusts you to solve your own problem. A pause. She isn't embedded to make decisions. She is the decision. The screen jumped. A second clip played. Helmet cam footage. A firefight. Screams. Static. And then silence. Into the frame walked Kara, alone, stepping over debris, bullets ignoring her like the world had decided she was immune. One hand outstretched, the other carrying the same device Reyes had seen in the ravine. It pulsed once. The screen went white. Back in the bunker, Reyes leaned away from the monitor. She hadn't been pretending to be a soldier. She had been something more dangerous, a judgment. One the system only deployed when it no longer believed in its own people. He stood and yanked the drive out. Colonel Travers was waiting for him outside the bunker. "We've got reports she was spotted near the outer wire," he said. "You seen her?" Reyes looked at him, this time without fear. "She saved the general's life. She violated lockdown. She was never in it to begin with." Travers stepped forward. "You think you understand her? You don't. She's an asset that slipped out of control." Reyes shoved the flash drive into the colonel's hand. "Then maybe you should see why you were never supposed to control her." He walked away before Travers could speak. Because the truth wasn't up for debate anymore. Kara Elwood wasn't missing. She was choosing, and every system she left behind was already too late to stop what came next. General Mason opened his eyes slowly. The fluorescent lights above him pulsed like a distant storm, too bright, too still. He blinked against the haze. A familiar antiseptic scent clung to the air, sterile and cold. "Sir," someone said quietly. A face appeared in his peripheral vision. "Lieutenant Marcus Green, the base medic. You're at Fob Emberline. You were ambushed en route to Sector Delta. You've been unconscious for approximately 6 hours." Mason tried to speak, but his throat burned. Green poured a small cup of water, slid it into his hand. "You're lucky, sir. The bullet missed your femoral artery by less than half an inch. You'll walk again, but it's going to take time." Mason swallowed, forcing his voice to work. "Where is she?" Green blinked. "Sir? The one who pulled me out? Where is she?" There was a pause, one that told Mason everything. "She's gone, sir." He stared at the ceiling, letting the silence settle. Gone. Not arrested, not detained. Gone. He should have known, should have seen it. The moment she lifted him from that ravine and carried him across terrain no one should have been able to cross alone. The stillness, the calm, the precision. She wasn't just trained, she was built. "Lieutenant Elwood," he whispered. Green looked confused. "Sir, there's no record of—" "Don't bother," Mason interrupted. "You won't find her in the system." He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, because she was never supposed to be seen. Across the base, Reyes sat alone in the comms bunker again. The flash drive was gone, handed off to Travers, but the terminal had remembered. Or maybe she had left it behind on purpose. The screen flickered, and then a message appeared. Not a video, just 4 lines of plain text code, blinking in stark white. Reyes, do not trust the debrief. The system is cleaning house. You have 48 hours. He stared at it, heart hammering. No signature, no trace. But he knew who sent it, and he knew what it meant. She wasn't just disappearing, she was covering him. By 1,600 hours, the first whispers broke containment. A journalist embedded with Joint Command in Bahrain tweeted, then deleted a single sentence. Intel says 1 man lived because of someone who wasn't supposed to exist. 17 minutes later, a defense analyst reposted it. By evening, the story had a name, The Whisper in the Wire. Someone, somewhere, had leaked a fragment of Kara Elwood's actions. They didn't name her. They didn't need to. The myth was already stronger than the record. Inside Emberline, Colonel Travers was in full damage control mode. We deny everything, he snapped to his team. There was no unauthorized tech, no off-manifest personnel. The convoy returned due to tactical regrouping, not an ambush. What about General Mason? One junior officer asked. He's resting. Until we brief him properly, he says nothing. And Reyes? Travers turned sharply. What about Reyes? The room went quiet. He's been spotted near off-grid comms terminals twice this week, accessing logs outside of standard protocol, digging into phantom code. Travers's expression darkened. Pull his clearance. Send a transfer order. By the time he's on the next bird, this story will be buried. Reyes received the notice at 1730 sharp. Reassignment order. Effective immediately. Destination Fort Fairview, Alaska role. Communications inventory analyst, in other words, exile. He read the order, then folded it, just like Kara had folded hers. He didn't react, but he didn't argue. Instead, he walked to the end of the airfield and sat on a low bench facing the desert. It was quiet here. The sky bled gold and orange across the flat horizon, and the wind pushed softly at the corners of his uniform. In his chest pocket, he felt the weight of something Kara had once given him, not the drive. That was gone. But the field notebook. He opened it. Inside, on the very last page, written in her precise, unflinching hand, truth isn't a command, it's a choice. Reyes stared at the words, then stood and walked toward the media tent. They were prepping for a controlled interview, pre-approved, sanitized. But when the reporter turned, Reyes didn't wait to be asked. My name is Elias Reyes, he said, and I'm going to tell you what really happened to General Mason. The interview was supposed to be cut. Security personnel tried pulling the feed after the 3rd minute, but it was too late. By then, Reyes had already said it. She carried him 5 miles through terrain that would have killed any of us, without medevac, without backup. She stopped a drone ambush with a device none of us even understood. And she did it after we stripped her rank, her clearance, and her identity. The reporter blinked. You're saying this woman wasn't even listed as a real soldier? Reyes looked straight into the camera. I'm saying she was the only real one in the room. Within 2 hours, the story was on every military subreddit, Defense Intel leak board, and Black Channel news thread. By the next morning, it hit mainstream. The soldier who wasn't there. Task and purpose carried by a ghost. CNN morning segment fail-safe protocol. The woman who outranked the system. Atlantic Defense weekly across the country, a ripple spread through command circles. Most dismissed it as exaggeration, but those who knew, those in black-level programs, high-clearance security chains, said nothing, which only made the myth stronger. Inside Pentagon circles, Travers was summoned for immediate review. A closed-door inquiry convened. Reyes's testimony was entered as evidence. So was the flash drive. It contained only one verified clip, the one showing Kara walking through an active combat zone alone, drones falling around her like birds cut from the sky. One line accompanied the file. Echo activated, judgment deployed. Travers sat stone-faced in front of the committee. He tried deflection, said he'd followed procedure, said Elwood was never cleared. That's when General Mason appeared via secure video link from Recovery Care. His face was pale, tired, but resolute. He interrupted Travers mid-sentence. "She saved my life, alone." While the system debated whether or not she was real, silence blanketed the room. Then Mason added, "If she wasn't part of this command, then maybe this command should have listened more carefully to who they labeled a threat." That ended the hearing. Not officially, but undeniably. Back at Emberline, Kara's name never reappeared in the system. Her quarters were empty, her locker gone, but someone left 3 words etched into the steel bunk frame with a combat knife. Just 3, fail-safe, not forgotten. 1 year later. Fort Fairview, Alaska. The snow came early that October, dusting the rooftops of the quiet comms station where Reyes now served. Transferred, technically promoted, but functionally isolated. The fallout from the Kara Elwood inquiry had faded from headlines. Travers had resigned for health reasons. The Pentagon quietly archived the Phantom Echo files. Mason returned to duty, mostly silent on the record. But Reyes hadn't forgotten. He still kept the notebook in his locker, still remembered the words she left him. Truth isn't a command, it's a choice. At 0541, a junior analyst knocked on his door. "Sir, we've got something weird on satellite past 19. Reyes rubbed the sleep from his eyes and followed her to the monitoring station. The screen showed a grainy overhead feed of a small insurgent outpost in northern Raqqa. Burned-out vehicles, collapsed tents, thermal signatures still radiating. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "We think the target self-destructed. No drone strike, no munitions signature, just stopped transmitting." She clicked backward in the feed, rolling the footage back 10 minutes. Then she paused. "There," she whispered. Reyes leaned in. Amid the blur of smoke and heat shimmer, a figure emerged for exactly 7 frames, moving through the dust like a shadow. Female, compact, tactical gait, and on her left wrist a pulse of violet-blue light. Reyes froze. The analyst said, "She walked into the fire zone. Nothing on satellite before or after. Just those 7 frames, no ID, no signal." Reyes exhaled. "She doesn't broadcast, sir?" He didn't answer. He just stared, because she was still out there, still responding to the calls no one else hears, still answering situations too broken for protocol, a fail-safe, walking where permission no longer mattered. That night, Reyes sat alone under the northern lights. He held the notebook on his lap, flipping back to the first blank page. He picked up his pen and began to write, "Some ghosts aren't dead. They're just waiting to be needed again." He paused, then added one more line. She wasn't a fake. She was the final order. So maybe she wasn't on the roster. Maybe she wasn't in the system. But in the end, Kara Elwood didn't need permission to do what was right. She carried more than a general on her back that day. She carried the burden of silence, of being doubted, dismissed, erased, and still choosing to protect the very system that erased her. That's what makes a real soldier. Not the uniform, not the rank, but the choice to act when it counts, even when no one is watching. If this story moved you, if it made you rethink what strength really means, subscribe to Veteran Biker, where we honor the quiet heroes, the unseen warriors, and the ghosts who still serve. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Kara's story stayed with you the most? Drop it in the comments. We read every one. And don't go yet. There are more powerful stories waiting for you right now. Tap on any of the videos on your screen and dive deeper into the world of Silent Defenders. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next mission.